Mac and Me is not a film, it's a 90-minute advert for McDonald's. Like a malignant tumour, their presence is completely unavoidable, and it's not even subtle. The main alien in the film is called Mac.
Something I've been telling you about, the Mac!
What?
The mysterious alien creature!
Really? The film's producer, RJ Lewis, insists that this is purely a coincidence, but I'm going to insist that that's bullshit. One of the characters actually works for McDonald's, and wears her uniform in all but one scene she's in.
It's McDonald's, huh?
Yeah. Why don't you stop by for a Big Mac?
Characters talk about McDonald's when there's absolutely no reason to.
You know what I feel like?
A Big Mac?
Man is a genius.
You see how forced that was? The whole film is like this. There's even a scene set in a McDonald's. And trust me, you'll want to stick around for that. And Ronald McDonald even introduces the film in its theatrical trailer. I shit you not.
Hi kids, it's me, Ronald McDonald, and I'm on the set of my very first motion picture ever. It's a movie called Mac and Me.
It seems that the filmmakers did have the best of intentions. Producer Lewis wanted to make a film that would give something back to the world, so he spent 3 years negotiating the rights to the McDonald's brand. The idea being that McDonald's would promote the film in their restaurants and the film's profits would go to charity. Here's a pro tip. If you're trying to use a film to raise money for charity, make sure that the film doesn't suck so hard that it only makes half its money back. McDonald's didn't finance the film directly, but funding was acquired from a supplier who worked exclusively with McDonald's. And Mackie D's even offered notes on the script, so the link is quite clearly there. And I can only assume that Coke also had their grubby corporate hands wrist deep in this pie, because their shit is everywhere. Everywhere. Not only is it the favourite drink of both the main protagonists and the aliens in the film, but it becomes transformed into a fucking miracle cure that serves as an important plot point. Skittles are forced in as well, in an obvious reference to a scene from E.T. Speaking of which, this film is a blatant rip-off of E.T. In fact, Lewis admitted that he wanted to give another generation its E.T. The plot points are more or less the same, and any changes they did make, like giving Mac a family, aren't enough to change that. You'll see what I mean when we go through the plot itself. Which is not good. Not only is it a shameless copy of a much better film, and not only is it written entirely around its product placement, but it relies on the fact that every single person in this film is a complete f***ing idiot.
We're gonna lose him, Bill!
Everyone.
Hey, look at all the cars.
There are some points where the plot simply would not progress if the characters didn't act like they'd shoved a school's worth of crayons up their nose. It's a clear sign of poor writing, as is some of the dialogue, which reaches Elder Scrolls levels of cringe.
I've gotta go. What's your name? Eric. I'm Debbie. This is my sister Courtney.
Hi.
Hi. We'll talk later.
Okay. See ya.
Bye. Come on.
Not exactly Oscar-worthy material, but it doesn't help that the acting isn't great, with sometimes shocking line delivery.
I don't have it. I didn't take it. Get after them. Move it.
See you later. Give me a call.
I'm suspicious of child actors at the best of times, but this girl really rustles my jimmies.
Oh my gosh, that's my mom. What are we going to do? I don't know what he is. You should back me up. It wouldn't do any good. They only believe what they want to believe. They already think you got schizophrenia.
Fortunately, neither of these kids ever appeared in a film again, and as a piece of filmmaking, it was never going to win any awards. Despite coming out after E.T. and having a higher budget, the visual effects are noticeably more lackluster, and the aliens that the entire film is supposed to be centered around look ridiculous.
It just looks fucking weird.
I don't know what the f that even looks like. It's like a condom stretched around a fist.
With just the butthole and...
Yeah, with a butthole for a face. There's also some editing mistakes, especially with the audio. Like there's several instances where the dialogue doesn't match the visuals.
No! Eric!
And there's even problems with the music, since they're essentially ripping off John Williams. You'd think, how could they fuck up the soundtrack? Well, far too often the music doesn't match what's going on. Either because the song has carried over from a scene where it was playing but now no longer makes sense,
I can't see anything.
Put the stuff over on the table, guys.
You're gonna love it.
or because the lyrics of the banging 80s anthems don't relate to what's actually happening.
You came along
I'm painting a pretty good picture so far, aren't I? But it's nothing compared to the actual movie. So let's dive face first into this pile of manure, shall we? Goggles on. It begins with Mac and his family living on some planet. We're not sure where, it's not explained, and this is a common theme. They get sucked, yes, sucked, into a NASA spacecraft, which brings them back to Earth. At the NASA base, we're introduced by name to some very minor characters, like this professor of something, who doesn't reappear until the very end, making his setup completely pointless. Anyway, the aliens quickly escape despite a massive security presence. Max somehow evades dozens of agents and a helicopter.
He's heading towards the north bend. He's up from the bend.
You think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created?
He gets hit by some cars, but seems to suffer no lasting damage. But it's a great occasion to show off those dazzling visual effects. Max sneaks into a car belonging to Eric and his family.
It's probably an ADUI.
What?
An alien driving under the influence.
These are our protagonists. Yay. The authorities do an absolutely piss-poor job of checking the cars, so Mac manages to slip away. You see what I mean about idiocy and incompetence being essential to the plot. Max settles down with some of that delicious coke. He f***ing loves coke, by the way. That's quite a big thing in this film. Eric and family arrive at their new home, where they quickly meet neighbor girl.
Shh! We're communing with the earth spirits.
This film has not aged well.
Right.
Eric looks at a family photo. Presumably that's the dad. I'm assuming he died, but his absence is never explained or brought up again, so it's irrelevant. The actor himself is actually disabled, if you're wondering. While the family moves in, Max sneaks around the house, stealing things, leaving the shower running, leaving muddy footprints on the carpet, and just generally being a dick. In fact, this is another common theme. Mac and his family love messing with other people's stuff and relieving them of their possessions, especially if those possessions are coke. You might even say they're coke addicts? And it gets worse as the film goes on. Anyway, while following the footprints, Eric runs into neighbor girl and her older sister.
Welcome to the neighborhood. Looks like you'll be an interesting addition.
To my collection.
And then for the next 15 minutes, we witness this stupid cat and mouse game where Max spies on the family and leaves little hints, but never actually introduces himself. Instead, he starts destroying the house, drilling glory holes and reenacting The Shining.
Little pigs, let me come in.
Hi, kids. It's me, Ronald McDonald.
The mum freaks out and thinks that Eric somehow managed to do all that because she's an idiot. Understandably upset and probably questioning his sanity, Eric wanders off to the bottom of the garden. He hears the alien whistling and decides to investigate. And here we get to experience the greatest moment in cinematic history. Oh, perfection. Turns out he can't swim, so Max saves him. And notice how he doesn't swim or even move underwater, he just sinks? Everyone thinks Eric tried to off himself because he's crazy, so he decides to trap the little bastard. They drive the mum to her new job at Sears, which is the entire reason they moved here. So there's another product placement.
Coons! Well, raccoons trying to get on our back porch, Mama just chasing them off with a broom.
Neighbor girl sneaks over to help Eric catch the Xenos scum. They lure him with coke and then suck him into a vacuum cleaner. How did he know that would work? He had absolutely no reason to think that would work. But at this point, f*** it.
Sanity is for the weak.
Eric reverses the motor and burns Mac alive. Jesus Christ. But it's okay, they revive him with coke. Oh, I get it now. Mac and coke. God, this film is terrible. The mum comes back and neighbor girl runs away like a little bitch. The mum doesn't believe them.
You sucked this living thing into a vacuum cleaner?
I know, right?
No, I can handle it. I can, really. I can handle it.
They wake up and Mac has cleaned and repaired the whole house. Again, no explanation as to how. Mac hijacks a toy car and goes on the run, chased by what I'm assuming is every dog they could find. Because that's funny? Is that funny? Okay, that was a little bit funny. There's a running scene that goes on way too long and is completely pointless. Moving on, the FBI agents from earlier show up. They think Mac is in the house.
It's here.
Even though they have absolutely no evidence for that.
I bet they're looking for him. Maybe that's why he's so scared.
I take it all back, this girl is a f***ing genius. Mac is clearly suffering as much as I am, so of course their first reflex is to give him coke. They have a birthday party to go to, and since it's been well established that Eric is a Chicago Bears fan, presumably because the writers were, they decide to sneak Mac out of the house by dressing him in the Bears mascot from earlier.
Who's that? It's just my old Chicago Cubs mascot.
Again, you see how this film is written around the products. On that note, guess where the party is? Go on, have a guess. Go on, go on. Seriously? There's some street dancing going on outside, and it's utterly pointless. Even those kids agree. There's Jennifer Aniston in her film debut. At least it was all uphill from here. Ronald McDonald finally makes an appearance. Fun fact, he won a Razzie for this. The party itself is not important to the plot. The birthday girl is another named character who has absolutely no other role in this story. It's just an excuse to have a scene in McDonald's. Lewis claims that he wanted this scene to make sure that the film was a feel-good movie or some other BS, but nobody was fooled. And then everyone starts dancing. Oh yes, there's a dance sequence in McDonald's. You have no idea how much I wish I had not had to utter those words. It comes completely from nowhere and is just as awful as it sounds. So I'm going to move on before I start pouring bleach in my eyes. Since the FBI have followed them, our heroes, I guess that's what they're supposed to be, use the dance sequence as a distraction to make their escape. The FBI chase after them. Onto a highway. Morons. Eric grabs onto a truck in an obvious rip-off of that scene in Back to the Future, or perhaps a poor man's clone of the flying scene in E.T. Anything's possible when you have no integrity. The chase continues into Sears, I guess because they didn't get enough screen time earlier.
That's got to be the best part I've ever seen. So it would seem.
Because we haven't had enough product placement yet, Mac has been dropping hints that his family are at Wick's. So they now decide to drive there, as another ridiculous and pointless anthem plays.
Alright!
But in a shocking turn of events, Mac was actually referring to a Wick's sign, not a store. I'm glad though, it means we're being spared another dance sequence. So nearby they find Mac's family, who have almost starved to death. But no worries, they get revived through the power of Coke! Turns out that this works because Coke is like what the aliens were drinking out of the ground on their home planet. An entire planet made of Coke, huh?
Dude, can't handle it.
With no discernible plan, they drive off.
And on this farm we have a bird.
But because they didn't have enough Coke for the dad alien, he starts acting like a complete dickhead. When they stop for supplies, he steals some random girl's Sprite and flips her off. Yes, he flips her off. In a movie targeted at children. I refuse to believe this is not intentional. That one image sums up this entire film. The film is giving us the finger. The aliens then wander into a shop, start stealing Coke and threatening the staff. And they're the ones we're supposed to have sympathy for. The dad alien steals a gun, the police show up, somehow the dad knows how to use a gun, so there's a shootout. Everything blows up, because America! This kills Eric. Remember, this is a children's film. But the aliens, who somehow survived that massive explosion, revive him. And before you ask, no, they don't give him a Coke. Instead, they use some weird occult powers that, once again, come from nowhere and are never explained because this film is f***ing terrible. And then they get made American citizens. Seriously, that happens. And no one seems to notice how weird this is. I'm sorry, but if a group of illegal aliens broke into a store, stole property, intimidated staff, and started a gunfight with the police, they would not be getting made citizens of the United States. What is this film? Could they just not think of another way to end this travesty? Well, apparently not, because they drive off into the proverbial sunset, with a rather optimistic prediction.
You serious?
And then the credits roll. Thank f***. Mac and Me is a waste of any sane person's time. Not only is it a poorly made and utterly unoriginal film, but it serves as a perfect example of how egregious and crass product placement can get, and how such blatant and exploitative marketing, however coincidental or well-intentioned, can completely ruin whatever positive effect a movie might have had. Because there is one silver lining here. The producer felt that it was important to increase representation of people with disabilities in cinema, and indeed this is one of the first such examples of a disabled actor being centre stage. But that moral message was rendered completely meaningless because all that audiences saw was this.
Hi kids, it's me, Ronald McDonald.
And they were having none of it. Mac and Me spent only 2 weeks in cinemas, and even McDonald's themselves were uncomfortable with the end result, which speaks volumes. So now it lives on as a curious piece of cinema history, a cautionary tale about the dangers of corporate presence in movies, and of course, an internet joke.
Alright, get out.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, check out my review of Food Fight, another advert masquerading as a movie. Also have a gander over to my first impression series called In the Raw. Subscribe for future content, chuck us a like, comment and share to help the channel grow, and until next time, stay cynical.